In this video we'll be continuing with the C# video tutorials, so csharp.net. So we'll be going over storing class type objects in arrays and lists. So we've done some of this stuff before in the notes. So we'll be just doing some more examples and maybe a lab. So you can store a collection of class type objects in an array or a list. It's a little confusing. It's one of the more advanced things, but it's not that hard once you get it. So arrays of class type objects, we'll start with that first. So objects that are instances of a class can be stored in an array. So for example, if you've seen the playlist on my channel, so I'll be just talking about some of the classes that we've discussed. We don't have to see the whole class for this video. I'm just assume that we have a class, another class. So we can create a cell phone, for example, array with 4 or 3 elements. So we can go, for example, so we can just pretend that we have some notes, kind of like some code notes down here, because it's going to be looking for the class, which we have already deleted that class. So we'll just pretend that we have it still. So we're going to so I'm just going to go up here. I'm going to say assume a class cell phone like this. Okay, so constant int, we'll just call it size. We'll point it to 3, for example. And then here, for example, we can say that we have a cell phone object like that. And we want to create an array. So when we create an array, how do we do that? So for example, we go int, so we go with the type, then the array block. So int array, then we name it array, points to new int array of how many elements. So for example, we could go like that, so that should be correct. So we should be able to do that up here. So I can go up here in the field area, so I can go private int array, call it array, points to new int array, and we can just pass it in, for example, a size of 3. That should work. So there's no errors there, so that's how you instantiate an array. Should be the same in C, sorry, not C, Java. I think in C it might be similar. It should be almost exactly the same, like normal C programming, not C#. You might have to put the type here. But I think in Java you can do it also both ways. So this is a way to do just a single dimension array. So pretty much, so what are we going to do when we want to instantiate an array of an object type? Well, in that case here, so what do we have here? We have type, array, then name, points to new, type, array of how many elements. So here we're going type, so because we want our object type, so we're going type here, which is, what's our type? The type is the object type, so that's, for example, we're assuming a class cell phone. So here, cell phone array, then we're going to call it, for example, cell phone. We call it array. And we could say we want to point it to a new, for example, and then here, cell phone. So then here we'll pass in the array block with the parameters. So we want the size of, we're going to allocate the size here, so we'll just pass in, for example, size. So you could do the same thing here. You could pass in size to that array size allocation, or for the size allocation of the array, or you can just pass in a number like that. So that's the same thing that you can do. The same thing you can do both ways, whatever. So it's exactly the same if you look at these types. It's just that we have an object type here instead of an int. So we can replace this with ints and it'll be the same thing. So that's how you do it. But it's a little different because each index stores an object itself. So that's the tricky part. So objects that are instances of a class can be stored in an array. So this code creates an array. It does not yet contain any objects, so this array is basically just null right now. I believe all the indexes are null because it's not a number type. So it's kind of like a type that you defined yourself. In that case, it's like an object type you defined yourself. So in that case, it's going to be null because remember object references variables will be null if they're not instantiated to any values. So each element of the array is a reference variable or an object reference variable. By default, each element will have null. So this will be all indexes are null by default. Okay, so the next step is to create the objects that each element will reference. So this can be done. You can use a loop to do it. I think we have a loop example. I've done a loop example. Okay, I think we'll probably do another loop example. So what you could do is you could say, for example, cell phone array. So you could start initializing some of the indexes. So you could go, for example, cell phone array of array index 0 points to, then you have to say new. So this is what you can do, or you can instantiate an object and just point. So let's just go this way first. So you can go, for example, cell phone array of array index 0 points to new. And here you could say cell phone array like this. So in index 0, in cell phone array of array index 0, we're storing a cell phone array object. So new cell phone, and then remember, we can pretend that we have a class with no parameters, just like that. So for the next one, we just say cell phone array. We'd add 1 to 0. For the next index, we just go cell phone array of array index 0 plus 1, so that's 1. Points to new. Then here's cell phone array. Okay, for the next one, we'll go cell phone array of array index 2. Points to new, for example, cell phone array. So you get the idea. So we could go all the way down to how many elements we have, 1, 2, 3, so that should be everything. Any more, you'll get a, what is it called? Out of bounds, index out of bounds, something like that. You'll get an exception or an error that's going to be an index out of bounds. It'll tell you if you try to instantiate any more objects that the memory allocation will be full. Okay, so you can also use a loop, so you can, for example, do it this way. So this is another way. So for example, you could use a loop. We could say that we have an int I points to 0 to start. We go I is less than cell phone array dot length, so we'll call the dot length property. Then we'll go with I plus plus, so it's going to add 1 every time. Okay, so here, for example, we could go cell phone array of array index. We're going to pass in I points to new. What are we going to do each time? So every time we loop through, starting at index 0, we want to instantiate a new cell phone. So this is kind of a trick. It's kind of a tricky code to remember because each index you're instantiating a new object, so you may not be used to that. So you kind of just have to write this out. So you can use an initialization and declaration statement to do it as well. So you can use an initialization list. So you could also do it another way. Or you could go, for example, so we could pretend that we have another array here, for example, so cell phone. So what do we call this? Just cell phone with a capital. And then lowercase p. Okay, so cell phone, we can, for example, just call it phones, or phone. Or we can just call it cell phone because we already called it cell phone array. So we could go cell phones like that, points to new. Actually, no, I'm sorry, not new. So the thing here to do is you call the class, then you say the name, and then you open up a initialization list like that. So what we can do is just go like that, indent it. Writer might format it, auto format it. But here we'll go, for example, cell phone. So new cell phone like that. Well, actually, you could just do it like this. Okay, we'll just go it this way. So new cell phone, like that, and then comma. So these are just going to declare them to null. Well, I guess, yes, they're going to be initialized to null. Actually, no, sorry. So these objects will have, they're going to have no data in them, but it's going to be an object. So in this case here, we're going to say new cell phone, comma, and then new cell phone. So comma, then we could go to the next line. So here we could say we have another one, new cell phone. Then here we could just, for example, close it like, just like that. Oops. So that's the syntax to do it. I know it's kind of written weird. We could have just did it all the way across one line or something like that. So you could do, we could go back to the bank account example, and we could say, for example, so we could assume that we have another class. So I'm just going to say that I'm not going to write it out. So actually, maybe I'll just say, whoops, what's happening here? Okay, so we'll assume a bank account class. So these classes are in the previous videos. If you're interested, you don't really need to see them. Maybe you might want to, but to see how they're created, if you're interested in that, it's in the C# playlist on my channel. Okay, so assume a bank account class. Then here, for example, we'll say bank account array named accounts or whatever. So bank account array named bank accounts points to an array initialization list like that. Then we'll instantiate an object here, so new bank account. So remember, each index is going to have an object of type bank account. So here we'll say new bank account like that. We could pretend that this one takes a parameter, so we could just put some numbers in it like that, whatever. And here, for example, we could go with another one. We can instantiate another one as well. So we have three. We could just pretend that we have, for example, well, I guess in this case we wouldn't need a size declaration because we're kind of just doing them on the fly here. We do have to close it at some point. So for example, we could just continue with 1, 2, 3. We'll just go with one more. Okay, so we'll just leave it like that. So pretty much that's just, actually sorry, so we'll have to close them. So the last one wouldn't have a comma on it. So let's go to the next line, then here we'll have the bracket and we'll semicolon. Okay, so that's pretty much just the array initialization list. So each index has its own object of type bank account. So in this case, you could have different parameters with them. So for example, this one stores a number, some large number. The next one would have another account with a number. We could pretend that the number is the balance. So here we have 4 different bank accounts in one bank account array, where each index is a different bank account object with a different parameter. So it's each object storing different data in each index, if that makes sense. But in this case, where it gets a little bit tricky is that, I don't know, I'm not sure why you would need to do this. You may need to do this initially at some point if for your app or something, I'm not sure. But you might have, for example, a cell phone array, and each index has a cell phone but with no data in it. So that could also be possible. So remember, each cell phone object would point to a different memory location. That's how the compiler would differentiate them. So then this one would be, for example, a hexadecimal number, like OX123. The next one would be like OX1234. The next one could be like OX1235. So if you're interested in the actual memory allocation, I did some of that in C programming, so you can check that out in my playlist if you want. Okay, so for example, the arguments that are passed to the bank account constructor for each object instantiates an int to a different. So just back here, it instantiates each account with a different int that could be, for example, a starting balance. So we already talked about that, for example. So now we can loop through the array itself. So let's try to loop through this one. So it can be a little bit tricky, so we'll just go back here. Okay, so we could just loop through this. For example, we could say that we have we could say we could say int I points to 0 again. I is less than. But you could say that we want to loop through bank accounts like that. So bank accounts dot length. You want to say we want to add 1 to I every time, so I plus plus. So remember, I plus plus just means I points to I plus 1. Then here we could have, for example, that we want to have a message box. So you go with messagebox.show to just show up kind of a message on the app, and then we can say, for example, we can have a string here, so we can say the balance is, with a space, concatenated to, then we want to access bank account. I think, do we say this was just, okay, yes, we just called it bank account, sorry. So this one should have an S on it. We're referencing the one up here. This array bank accounts like that. So here we're saying, for example, bank accounts. So we want to loop through bank accounts. So you could have used a for each loop to do this. You could use a normal for loop, whichever one you want to do. So here, for example, we're just saying messagebox.show. We're passing in a string concatenated to bank accounts of array index I, and we could pretend that we have a field, or sorry, a property that we want to access. So we could say that we want to access the balance field, which we created in the last one of the last few tutorials. So you can check that out, how to create a property. So that's pretty much it. So that's going to loop through the array, print out the balance in each object. So it'll get the balance property from each index in the array. So 0 to the length, adding 1 every time. So I points to I plus 1, which will get you the next index. So on iteration 0 here, we're just printing, we're showing a message box. The balance is plus bank accounts of array index. For example, we're on iteration 0, so we'll pass in 0 to I. So bank accounts of array index 0 dot balance, this would get us this balance here, which is like some big balance like that. Then we get to the bottom of the loop, we loop back up to the top, we check the condition. We add 1 to 0, so 0 points to 0 plus 1. So now I points to 0, I is less than bank accounts dot length, so it's in a range here, 0, 2 for example. So what's the length? The length is 1, 2, 3, 4, so we go I is less than 4. So this would, the max iterations would just be 3, so 0 to 3. So the formula is 0 to, for example, the length minus 1. So if the length is n, so then it would be 0 to n minus 1. So you just add 1 to I every time. So in this case, we're at I points to 1. So in this case, on the next iteration, then we just say messagebox.show. The balance is plus, so it'll concatenate this string to, for example, bank accounts of array index 1, which will be this index here, and it'll get the balance property which is storing $123. So we can do the same thing, I believe, in a for each loop. So we could say, for example, that we have a for each loop like that. So we want to say, for example, for each, and we want to have a pointer variable to point to each index. So to do that, we just reference the type of type bank account. So here, for example, we could say that we want so remember, this is going to be the type. So the first parameter, so the first argument in a for each loop is going to be the type, or the parameter pretty much. So in this case here, we'll just say that we have a bank account type. We could just call it, bank account val or something. So for each bank account val in, then we'll say, for example, bank accounts. We want to reference the array. We want to get each index in the bank accounts array. So we want to loop through that array. So in this case, the bank account val will point to index 0 to start, add 1. So it won't show you in the debugger that it's adding 0 to 1, then 1 to 2, then 2 to 3. So it's not adding 1. It's not going to show you that. It's just going to do that automatically. So here, for example, we could do the same thing, messagebox.show, with the exact same string, the balance is concatenated to. We'll concatenate the string to bank accounts of array index I, and we want to access the balance property, so we'll call the dot operator and then balance. So on iteration 0, the bank account val is going to be pointing to right here, 10 million. So that's going to be pointing to bank accounts of array index 0, but it's not going to tell you that it's at iteration 0. Then it's going to get to the bottom of the loop, loop back up to the top, automatically add 0 points to 0 plus 1. Then the bank account val is just going to point to the next index, which is going to point to 123. Then the message box will show on the app that the balance is plus. It'll show the balance to the user. Loop back down to the bottom, then loop back up to the top. Then it'll say, so the bank account val will then point to the next index. So it'll point to 11111. So then it'll say message box.show the balance is 11111 to the user. Then it'll loop back down to the bottom, then back to the top, check the condition to see if it's still looping through the indexes within the number of indexes, which is 3. Then here it'll say bank account val points to this number here, whatever, several number of 9s. It'll show that the balance is like 999 all the way. And then it'll loop back to the bottom, it'll loop back up to the top, and then it'll say that it'll check if it's still in the range. In this case, we've already surpassed index 3, so it's going to be like, well, this condition's false now, so the loop's going to be done because it's already traveled through all the indexes in memory. That'll probably wrap up. That'll wrap up array. So basically, arrays of class type objects. So they're not that hard. They're kind of tricky, so you just kind of have to just write them out or practice them. So in the next video, we'll be going over arrays of list type objects. So thanks for watching, guys. If you guys like the video, you can like and subscribe to support the channel for more programming and investing tutorials. I'll see you guys in the next one. Thanks for watching. The next video will be on the csharp.net playlist in my channel. I'll see you guys there. Thanks for watching. Take care. Thanks.